There's a pattern that plays out inside almost every human brain on the planet. It usually starts around 2 in the morning, or in the shower, or in the middle of a conversation you stopped paying attention to 3 minutes ago. The pattern is this: your mind picks up a thought, turns it over, examines it from every angle, and then, instead of setting it down, picks up another one just like it, and another, and another, until what started as a single worry becomes a hallway of mirrors, each one reflecting the same fear back at you from a slightly different angle. Most people call this overthinking. Most advice says, just stop. Here is what nobody tells you. There is a reason your brain does this. It is not a glitch, it is a feature, and it has a name. In the early 2000s, a neuroscientist named Marcus Reichel at Washington University noticed something strange. When research subjects were asked to do nothing, no task, no puzzle, no instructions, their brains did not go quiet. Certain regions became more active, not less. Reichel mapped these regions: the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, the lateral parietal areas. Together, they formed a network that only fires up when you are not focused on anything external. He called the default mode network, and that name turns out to be the most important word in neuroscience for understanding why your mind will not shut up. The default mode network is not random noise. It has a job. It runs simulations. It replays the past, conversations you had, mistakes you made, things you should have said differently. It rehearses the future, what could go wrong tomorrow, what might happen if you say the wrong thing, what your life looks like in 5 years if nothing changes. This is useful, in moderation. The problem is that for a significant percentage of people, this network does not have an off switch. It runs constantly. And the content it generates feels urgent, feels important, feels like it demands your attention, even when it is the same loop it ran yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. In 2010, two Harvard researchers, Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert, built an app. It pinged 2,250 people at random moments throughout their day and asked 3 questions. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? And how happy are you? The results were striking. People's minds were wandering, thinking about something other than what they were doing, roughly 47% of waking hours. Not during boring tasks, during everything: eating, working, talking to friends. And here is the part that changes things. Mind wandering was a strong predictor of unhappiness, not the content of the wandering itself. It did not matter whether people were thinking about pleasant things or unpleasant things. The act of being somewhere other than the present moment was, on average, making them less happy in being present, even during unpleasant activities. And that is worth sitting with for a moment, because it means the problem is not what you are thinking about. The problem is the loop itself. Now, here's where it gets more specific. Not all mental wandering is equal. There is a particular type that does the most damage, and psychologist Susan Nolan-Huxema spent nearly 2 decades studying it. She called it rumination. The word comes from the Latin ruminare, what a cow does when it chews the same food over and over. Rumination is not problem solving. Problem solving has a direction. You identify a problem, generate options, test them, move forward. Rumination goes in circles. Why did this happen to me? What is wrong with me? Why can I not fix this? The same questions, the same dead ends, the same emotional weight, repeated until exhaustion. Nolan-Huxema's research showed that chronic ruminators were significantly more likely to develop depression, anxiety, and substance abuse problems. Not because their problems were worse, because the loop itself was doing damage. And the loop has a mechanism. Every time you ruminate, you strengthen the neural pathways that carry that pattern. This is basic neuroplasticity, but working against you. The brain does not distinguish between useful repetition and destructive repetition. It simply reinforces whatever you practice. Think the same anxious thought 100 times, and the circuitry for that thought becomes faster, smoother, more automatic. It takes less to trigger it. It runs longer before it stops. This is not a metaphor. This is how synaptic strengthening works. The thought is not haunting you. You are training your brain to generate it. So the question becomes, if this loop is self-reinforcing, how do you break it? And here is where most advice fails. Just stop thinking about it is the equivalent of telling someone in a riptide to just stop drowning. The instruction is accurate in theory and useless in practice. The default mode network does not respond to willpower. You cannot think your way out of overthinking. That is the paradox. The tool you are using to fix the problem is the same tool generating it. What works is not suppression, it is interruption. And there are two techniques with solid evidence behind them. The first is called cognitive diffusion. It comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by Stephen Hayes in the late 1980s. The concept is deceptively simple. When a thought arrives, nothing will ever work out. You do not argue with it. You do not suppress it. You change your relationship to it. Instead of nothing will ever work out, you say to yourself, there is the thought that nothing will ever work out. That is the entire move. You add the phrase, there is the thought that, before whatever your mind is generating. What this does neurologically is shift activation from the default mode network toward the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, for observation, for metacognition. You are not stopping the thought. You are stepping back from it. And that step, that tiny distance between this is true and my mind is producing this, is where the loop breaks. The second technique is even simpler, and it is grounded in the work of neuroscientist Jill Bolt Taylor. She observed, and brain imaging has since confirmed, that the neurochemical lifespan of an emotion is approximately 90 seconds. When an emotion is triggered, anger, fear, anxiety, there's a chemical cascade in the body. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. That cascade peaks and dissipates within roughly 90 seconds. If you are still feeling the emotion after 90 seconds, it is because you have re-triggered it, with a thought, with a memory, with a story you told yourself about what the feeling means. The 90-second rule is this: when an overwhelming feeling hits, notice it. Do not narrate it. Do not explain it. Just let the chemistry run for 90 seconds. Watch the clock if you need to. After 90 seconds, the raw chemical wave is over. Whatever remains is not the emotion, it is the story. And stories, unlike chemistry, you can choose to set down. Now, these two techniques share something important. Neither one asks you to stop thinking. Neither one asks you to relax or be positive or trust the process. They both ask you to do something much more precise, to notice the difference between what your brain is generating and what you are choosing to engage with. That distinction between production and engagement is what most advice misses entirely. Your default mode network will keep producing. That is its job. But whether you climb inside every thought it generates, or whether you watch it pass like a car on a highway, that is not automatic. That is a skill. And like any skill, it gets stronger with practice and weaker with neglect. Here is the honest part. Knowing this does not fix it. Reading about cognitive diffusion is not the same as practicing it at 2 in the morning when the loop is running and the room is dark and every thought feels like the truth. The gap between understanding and doing is where most people live, and it is the most dangerous place in self-development. Because understanding feels like progress. It gives you the language, the framework, the sense that you have solved it. But the loop does not care about your understanding. It cares about your practice. So the real question is not, how do I stop overthinking? The brain will not stop generating thoughts. That is what brains do. The real question is quieter and harder. What will you do the next time the loop starts? Not in theory, not in a comment. At 2 in the morning, when it matters, and that is worth sitting with. Next time, what happens when observation itself becomes the trap? The part they do not warn you about.